Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Creepy Neighbor by Medicated Gummy Bear. I started this back in September of last year, but never got around to sharing it. I am now due to an uncomfortable situation again. Bear with me if I ramble a little bit. I'm writing this on an edible. I have to get some context out of the way. Let me start off by saying that I live in an apartment complex by a golf course country club on the edge of town. Since not many people live in this area, it can get pretty quiet at night. The complex is built partially into a small hill at the end of a road, with my apartment being on the back corner of the building on the ground floor. So the bottoms of the windows in the living room and both bedrooms start literally a few inches above the ground outside. There is also a trail behind my apartment building that goes through a small wooded patch. I don't have much of a view since my living room windows face a good 15-20 foot patch of grass before a tree line separating it from a few houses on the next street over. This has been going on for the last couple of months. I'm not entirely sure if this is just paranoia or coincidental. Last summer, a family moved into a house on the next street over, a couple of houses down from my apartment. I'd only seen one middle-aged man and a dog so far. I was taking my Shih Tzu Harley outside one day while the guy was out in his backyard just standing with his arms crossed, swaying from side to side. Like an NPC character in 2000s video games, waiting to be interacted with. The dumpster shed area is in view of his backyard. We made eye contact, so I awkwardly waved, and then just looked at my phone while Harley did her business. I could tell from my peripheral vision that he didn't look away from us. We had the same breed of dog, so I just assumed he was probably thinking of letting them meet sometime. But I wonder why he didn't have his dog outside with him. I just went back inside quickly after Harley was done. My younger brother lives in the same complex as I do, but on the second floor. He told me that every now and then he'd seen that man take his dog out into his backyard, but across the tree line into the complex's yard. He would circle the building slowly, a little too close to the building before going back into his house. In September last year, my boyfriend at the time and I split up. The night I told him to leave, I went to a friend's house to vent. I didn't want to leave Harley home alone too long, so after about an hour or so, I went back to my apartment. I knocked out on the couch while I had a black screen rain sound video on YouTube. I woke up around 2 a.m. to Harley going crazy, barking and growling. The other couch is right under the main window in my living room, and Harley had climbed up the couch and was barking at the window between the curtains. I got up to get her down and be quiet when my stomach dropped. I realized something. The curtains are on the thinner side, and I can normally faintly see the streetlights from the next street over through those curtains. I started getting a little nervous, realizing that there was a black mass blocking some of the light where Harley was standing. I grabbed the remote to shut the TV off while I was getting closer to the window. The TV turned off in the style of retro TVs where the picture closes in on itself. When I turned it off, the flash animation on the TV illuminated the room briefly. It was enough that I was able to make out the form of someone dressed in dark clothes crouched down looking into my window. In the flash, they probably saw me too because they ran away quickly. I picked up Harley and ran to the kitchen to grab a knife, and went to my room and locked the door. I texted my ex asking him if he was on the outside of the window just then. He replied back no, and then asked what was happening. I didn't believe him because he's never awake that late, and I told him I was about to call the police, so to just tell me the truth. He told me that I should call them either way and sent me his live location, showing that he was at his friend's house over an hour away. I called the police and let them know I had seen someone outside my window, and they came out and looked around, finding nothing. An officer told me they'd keep someone in the area, so to just call back if anything else happened. Over the next couple of weeks, around the same time, 2 or 3 a.m. each night, Harley would freak at the window. By the time I'd get to her, though, I couldn't see anyone outside. Fast forward to May 2024. That week I went through my storage closet and found some of my ex's things. I was out with some friends that night when he came to pick them up, and he ended up texting me to come home so we could talk about something important. I got home and I noticed that he had a puzzled look on his face. I asked why couldn't this have just been a text, and he told me that while he was loading his stuff in his truck, he took Harley out quick, and he was approached by an older lady that lives on the second floor. As I mentioned, the dumpster is at the end of the parking lot, and if you turn right, you'll face the side of the building in the general area outside my living room window. There's a few big trees keeping the area back there pretty dark, and even in the summer it's deeply shaded. She said that as she was taking her trash out, she heard a twig snapped and looked at the direction it came from. Then she said she saw a man outside my window. Not just walking around, he was up close peering into my living room. One hand up on the window trying to block the light so he could see, and his phone in the other hand pointed inside my apartment. She yelled out asking him what the fuck he was doing, but he just acted like he didn't hear her and walked away slowly in the opposite direction. She said it would be one thing if he had just been walking through the yard and glanced over at my window, but he was full on pressing his face against the glass looking in. My blood ran cold and I got goosebumps. I've since bought a Ring camera, which is something I should have done a long time ago. I'll update if anything else happens. He Had No Reason to Be There, by either channel. This happened a long time ago when I was at school, but it recently came back and I've always remembered it clear as day. When I was in primary school, we used to go on school trips to a place called Marcangelo Hill in Surrey, UK. Marcangelo Hill is an adventure center that mainly caters to schools. They have activities like climbing, orienteering, canoeing, etc., and they had dorms to stay in. We usually went for 4 or 5 days. The place sat on 45 acres of land, and there's no reason to be there other than the above. I believe they also have a part for adults for team building trips and stuff like that. But the two places are not together, so we'd only ever see employees or sometimes kids from a different school while we were there. One evening we were camping out for the night. A Marcangelo Hill employee led us to the camping area at about 7 p.m., helped show us how to set up our tents and started a fire, and then left for the night, leaving us in the care of 2 of our teachers from school. We had a fire going and were all sitting around it on logs that were placed right around the fire area. We were singing songs and talking and just being kids as it got darker. After a while, a couple of us heard the sound of someone approaching, but I thought nothing of it. Probably just an employee checking in. Suddenly, this guy appeared out of the darkness and loudly said, "You shouldn't be here." Everyone whipped their head around to see who it was, and there was this guy just standing there. He was a big guy and looked homeless in that he had a big scraggly beard and hair, but he was wearing a suit with Wellington boots and was holding a plastic bag. One of our teachers said to him, "It's okay, we're booked in for a few days. We're from this school." The guy looked around for a few seconds like he was checking behind himself and then repeated, "You shouldn't be here," but louder this time. The male teacher that was with us jumped up and positioned himself between the guy and us kids real quick and repeated that we were supposed to be there and asked the man who he was, while at the same time grabbing him by the arm to sort of lead him away. The strange guy pulled his arm away aggressively, then walked off quickly without saying another word. A bit later, all of us kids were in our tents, 2 to a tent. The teachers were still sitting around outside, probably enjoying some child free time when we heard some shouting. It sounded to me like, "Go! Go! Get out!" A few of us opened our tents, and I could just about see the same guy standing there in the darkness. Our teacher was already right by the guy at that point and shouted at him to leave. But the guy just looked at him, so the teacher started to gently push him back away from us and was saying something to the guy while doing so. They both disappeared into the darkness of the surrounding area for maybe 30 seconds, and then my teacher came back and with a look of urgency said, "We're going back to the dorms right now." I have no idea what was said, but my teacher's whole demeanor had changed. We all left our tents pitched and walked the 10 minutes or so back to the dorms by torchlight. Once we were in the dorm, our teacher went off to speak to an employee, and about 15 minutes later we saw a police car pull up by the reception area, and the police talked to my teacher. That guy had absolutely no reason to be on that 45 acres of land. Looking back, he probably had mental health issues, but he scared the crap out of us, and thinking of it still makes me feel a little uneasy. Creepy Encounter with My Family Doctor by Renee89. So one day I had a creepy encounter with my family doctor. I'm a 35-year-old woman now, but this encounter happened when I was around 14 or 15 years old, so about 20 years ago now. But the memory is as fresh and as vivid as though it happened yesterday. I hadn't even thought of this story in many years until I came across a Reddit channel, and after reading some of those stories, my own personal memory of a story came flooding back. Everyone in my family, and some still do, used to see this one family doctor for many, many years for all of our medical needs. I'll call him Dr. D. We'd been seeing this doctor for so long, he was even there at the delivery of my birth, where he held me in his arms when I was just a newborn baby. From then on, I would see him for everything. Every time I got sick, for all my immunizations, etc., etc. So it was only natural that I would go see him the day I needed to get my first pap smear done. I had just started becoming sexually active for the first time with my very first boyfriend at that stage, and I had learned in school sex ed, as well as from other various sources, that once a female starts becoming sexually active, they also need to start getting pap smear tests done. Okay, for those clueless males out there, a pap smear pap test is a test or procedure done by your doctor to check for cervical cancer in women. The test is not painful in any way, but can feel a bit strange. It's uncomfortable and invasive as it requires a swab being inserted inside to collect the sample. Other than that, it's a very quick procedure that altogether takes no longer than a minute or two from start to finish. This last point is important to take note of for later in this story. It's also important to note here that even before arriving to my appointment, I was already in a state of feeling a little bit freaked out and uncomfortable with the whole situation, because at 14, I was like a lot most other young girls of my age when I felt very awkward about my growing body. I had poor self-image, would often wear baggy clothes to hide any signs of my womanhood from the outside world, such as the breasts that were forming. So the idea that I had to do a test that required I strip from the waist down and sit on a bench with my legs wide open, only to have some random grown-up come right up in there and fiddle around down there, sounded to me like the last thing in the world I wanted to do, and I was already feeling embarrassed about it. Even though I was told by many different people that if I wanted, and if it made me more comfortable, I could request a female doctor to do the test, but for some reason, I turned that option down, something I would later regret. I guess I just thought in my head, it's okay, I'll just see Dr. D like I always do. I mean, he is my doctor. I've known him for years, so it's only natural I continue to see him and treat this appointment like any other appointment. and I guess I just managed to convince myself to stop being so silly. Everything was fine. And besides, he was a professional doctor who would approach the situation with professionalism, and he would conduct himself in a way that would not make me feel any more awkward than I already did. How wrong I was. So, Dr. D told me to take off everything from the waist down and to lie on the bed, put the white sheet over my lap, and wait for him while he got everything together. I did this, feeling a bit red in the face, but I did as he asked hurriedly, as I was impatient to get this over and done with quickly. When he did come around the curtain, he sat down on a low stool right between my legs, whipped off the sheet, and looked up at me with a big smile on his face. He then proceeded to have a conversation with me about, I don't really even remember. However, what I do remember was that it wasn't at all relevant to the situation at hand or anything to do with the test or any medical information in relation to me whatsoever. I just remember that he had chosen that moment to talk about other trivial things like, "So, how's the family doing?" or "What year level are you doing at school now?" and things of that nature. Honestly, I probably wasn't listening to anything he was saying at the time, as all I was thinking about was me screaming at him to hurry up and get on with it, and that I didn't feel like having a chit-chat with him while my private parts were in his face. But if I had thought for a second that this ill-timed catch-up session would be the most uncomfortable thing to happen at that moment, I would have been wrong. As he was chit-chatting away to me, as well as going back and forth between making eye contact with me and flashing me a wide smile to looking down at my private area with a deep, penetrating gaze, he all of a sudden wrapped his hand around my inner thigh, closest to where my knee was. He did so gently, almost like he was just resting his hand there for a second. But it did make me jump a little. He didn't seem to notice that, though, and continued talking, and as he was talking, I realized that he was slowly starting to circle his thumb on my inner thigh in a slow, gentle caress. Immediately, alarm bells started ringing in my head. I was thinking to myself, what is he doing? The action was almost like he was trying to soothe or relax me in some way, sort of like how a mother might use her hand to do small circular motions on her crying child's back in an attempting to soothe him. My question was, why was he doing this to me? Was it outwardly obvious about how uncomfortable I was with this situation, despite my best efforts to not let it show? And even if it was obvious to Dr. D, was it normal for a doctor to do this soothing action on a patient? And on top of everything, how much longer was this whole damn thing going to take? I thought this was meant to be a real quick procedure. And that's when I deep down started to realize that something was very wrong with this situation. Or that I started to sense his intentions weren't good, or appropriate at all. Because he started to move his hands slowly up my inner thigh towards my private area, still caressing me with his thumb, and still gazing directly at me as he went. It's when his hand reached its destination, and not because he was about to do the swab at that stage, but he just continued to caress me, that my legs started to shake uncontrollably. Not for any reason other than the fact that I was scared, and I just couldn't stop myself from shaking in fear. Then, the tears started to slowly form and roll down my face as I let out a little whimpering sound. Of course, Dr. D immediately noticed this, but he didn't stop at all or spring back like you would hope he would have done in that situation, as though he might be realizing what he was doing was wrong and decided to stop what he was doing. No, he just continued to do it more intensely and said to me, "Honey, you're shaking. What's wrong? Why are you feeling so nervous? Don't be nervous, honey. Just try and relax. Everything's fine." And he just continued to caress me. It was almost like he believed his own words and actions and was actually helping me to relax when quite clearly it was doing the complete opposite. But for some reason, I didn't say a word. I didn't tell him to stop or back off. I didn't move a muscle other than the uncontrollable shaking that I couldn't help. What was even more baffling about my behavior and reaction at that point was I even quickly tried to wipe my eyes and hide my tears from him so he didn't see them. But for some reason at that moment, I felt bad for him, because I was worried my tears and distress might be making his job harder in some way by me being a challenging or uncooperative patient. I can't explain why I thought or reacted that way, other than the fact that I was just a young 14-year-old girl who was freaking out and just didn't know what to do in an unsettling situation, and especially because it was happening with someone I had known my entire life and had looked up to, trusted. Anyway, he finally eventually did perform the test, and this story doesn't end with any further graphic details of some sort of sexual assault or anything of that nature. He did, however, act completely oblivious to my distress throughout the whole thing. Acted the whole way through like he wasn't doing anything wrong, and that everything was normal. Oh, and remember how earlier I had mentioned this test should only take usually maybe 1 to 2 minutes at most to complete? I was on that table for 15 minutes with him, which might not be a long amount of time, but to me it felt like years. And you know what the worst part is? The moment I got home to my parents, I burst into tears, flung myself into their arms, and proceeded to tell them the entire story. As freaked out as I was, within seconds I started to feel better just knowing that I was back within the safety net of their presence, but also knowing that once I finished telling them what happened, that my parents would know what to do to fix the situation as well as offer me much-needed comfort. You know what? That's not what I got. What I got was being immediately thrust out of their embrace and then straight away got the biggest telling off session of my life. They didn't believe a word I said. In fact, they got so angry at me for being a troublemaker and making up stories about their trusted family doctor who they'd known for years and knew for a fact wouldn't ever do anything of what I was accusing him of. They told me to stop crying and immediately grounded me. I was in complete and utter shock, and to this day I'm still not sure which one was worse. My doctor doing what he did, or my own family's reaction to the situation. Both experiences ended up hurting me deeply. So, ultimately nothing ever came of the situation. I had to bottle it up inside and bury it all away. And he got away with it. The only thing I had in my power to do was make the decision to never see him again, which I haven't to this day. There have been plenty of times where I had thought about reporting him to the police, especially fearing for the well-being of any other woman out there in his care. But after how my parents reacted, I convinced myself that the police probably wouldn't believe me either. If it came to me against him, I knew I would lose, so I stayed silent. I just truly hope that nothing awful has ever happened at his own hands to anyone else after my experience. Uncle Josh note here. Yeah, this is a tough one, man. And, in my opinion, scary as hell. Doctors, or dentists, anybody of the medical profession are people you're supposed to trust. And whatever he was doing, damn it, that sounds creepy, and I'm really sorry you had to go through with that. You should be able to trust your doctor. Two Guys in a Cooler by Inevitable Client. So, I'm a 23-year-old FTM dude. At the time of this story, I was probably 16 or 17. I had just started hormone replacement therapy, so I still looked like a teenage girl, but queer? I don't know. Anyway, I was dressed up for Halloween at work. I worked till 9 p.m. that night, a busy local pizza shop. I was cashiering and making salads all night, serving up smiles, if you will. Costumed and tailed, black jeans, company shirt, boots and black eyeliner with some glitter on my cheeks. Literally nothing big. Well, once I reconciled my drawer to make sure my crew was okay with me leaving, I headed out to do my usual walk home. It's a 2-mile walk, nothing huge, and it's on busy streets. I had my earbuds in, but also made sure I was being observational. Well, glad I was, because halfway through my walk, I spotted two middle-aged dudes carrying a cooler come out of the bushes, it seems, and head my way. I was on edge, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they live in the complexes across the street from me. Maybe they have a similar route to mine. It's probably just two homeless guys trying to find their way. Anything to calm my nerves. Well, as I was getting closer to my house, I had to cross the street at an intersection. I caught a glimpse and saw them follow me as I crossed, all in my peripheral vision. And they were moving faster. The streetlights became further and fewer between. I could feel my heart in my neck. I coughed into my elbow to see the two men not even 10 feet behind me walking quicker and rolling that damn cooler along, watching me intently. I pulled out my phone and called my mom, seeing my apartments but knowing I might have needed an intervention sooner than later. "Hey, sweetie," she said. "Two men following me. I'm coming up towards the house. Please meet me up on the street." "Hurry, please, they're close," I said. "I'm on my way," she replied. I tucked the phone back into my pocket as I walked fast towards my house and saw my mother's figure appear out of our driveway and start waving me down. I heard hurried footsteps run away from me as she came jogging towards me. I looked behind me, and the two men were bolting it up the street and down a side road. My mother had saved me at that moment. And she witnessed them too. She was so angry that I had been followed home. So, to those two randos, let's never meet again. I don't know what you had planned, but I'm glad I never found out. Caught a Voice on My Sleep Recording app by Raging See You Next Tuesday. This happened about 5 a.m.-ish one morning. Actually, 7-ish. I'm stupid and realized the recording is time-stamped. And this happened years ago. I'll also provide what I recorded. I was spending the night at my friend's house with another friend. It was summer, so we slept with the window wide open, and she didn't have a screen on her window. We were in a safe area, though, so we didn't think anything of that. I slept right next to the window with my phone on the windowsill. I used a sleep recording app on my phone because I was known to talk in my sleep, and it was amusing to hear what I had said. And also important to note, we were completely home alone that night. That time, however, my phone recording caught a man's voice. The first thing sounded like a grunt. Her window was high up, but not second-story high. Her house was kind of on a slope. Then we heard a man say, "Up, hello?" in a loud, almost cheery voice. And then at the end of the recording, you can hear the man whisper, "Oh God, something is wrong." Thank the heavens nothing happened that night. We weren't sure who the hell it could have been. It sounded like a full-grown man, and as mentioned, no one was home. I never slept over at her house after that, which I felt bad for because she was absolutely terrified to sleep in her room again. She also never slept with her window open again. We don't know if he was trying to break in, or maybe he thought it was a buddy's house and then saw 3 teenage girls all cuddling and sleeping together. I'm not sure at all, but I still get goosebumps listening to that recording. And I still don't sleep with my windows open. And I live nowhere near my friend now. So upon listening to it again, it does give me chills. I'd also like validation from anybody that I'm not crazy, and that you can actually hear him saying, "Oh God, something is wrong" at the end. My friends from that night agree that that's what he says, but my boyfriend says he can't hear it. Here's the sound. Let me know what you think.
Hello.
Uncle Josh note, I did boost the amplification on that recording, but that's the only thing I did. Tell me what you think you hear there. Would love to know in the comments below. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my podcast or this channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't done it so far, I would sure appreciate it if you would like this video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hit the notification bell for every time I upload. And of course, follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below. If you'd like to take your support a little bit further, you can find a link to my Patreon page in the description, as well as a link to my storefront at tpublic.com. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.